Hi, you are watching Revenge of Reddit. I never thought I'd be the kind of man who'd write a story like this. But here I am, sitting in my office, watching her through the glass wall, heels clicking nervously against the floor as she files papers for me. My ex, the woman I once loved more than life itself. The woman I bled for. The woman I would have died for. And now, she calls me sir. It's funny how life turns around. Let me start at the beginning. I was 22 when I met Emily. I was working 2 jobs, one at a warehouse, loading pallets overnight, and another as a mechanic during the day. I had no money, no family support, and no safety net. Just grit, sweat, and a dream. Emily was 20 at the time, bright, ambitious, and drop-dead gorgeous. The kind of woman who makes a whole room pause when she walks in. I met her at a coffee shop where she worked part-time while attending community college. I remember that first smile she gave me. It was disarming. I was sweaty and covered in grease from work, but she talked to me like I mattered. That was rare for me back then. We started dating quickly. Within weeks, she was staying over at my tiny studio apartment most nights. She had dreams of becoming a lawyer, a dream I admired deeply. She talked about wanting to change the system, to fight for the powerless. And me? I just wanted to build a life with her. We were poor, but we were happy. We shared cheap Chinese takeout on the floor because we couldn't afford a table. We watched pirated movies on an old laptop because a TV was so expensive. We talked about marriage, kids, a house, the American dream. Then came the moment that changed everything. One night, Emily broke down crying. She said her family couldn't afford university tuition, and financial aid barely scratched the surface. If she couldn't go to a proper law school, her dream was dead. She was ready to give it all up, and that's when I made the worst and best decision of my life. I told her I'd help. I took a second overnight shift, then a third. I sold my old truck and bought a beat-up 500 car. I stopped eating out entirely. Every extra cent I earned went to her tuition. I told myself it was an investment in our future, and it was, or so I believed. For 6 years, I worked myself into the ground while she studied. I paid for her classes, her books, her living expenses. I was too exhausted to have a social life, but I didn't care. She was doing amazing. Top of her class, internships at prestigious firms, professors calling her the next big thing. And when she graduated, I felt like we had graduated. We talked about marriage more seriously now. She wanted to get established first, which I understood. I was proud of her. I bragged about her to anyone who would listen. My girl, the future lawyer. Then, about 3 months after she started her first job at a high-profile law firm, things started to change. She became distant. She stopped coming home on time, claimed she was networking and meeting partners. She was glued to her phone, laughing at messages she wouldn't show me. She smelled like cologne that wasn't mine. The intimacy vanished. The warmth in her eyes faded. I confronted her. She denied everything. Then, one night, I came home early from a shift and found her in our bed with a man twice my age. I still remember the sound of her voice when she screamed my name. I remember the smug smile on his face as he pulled his shirt back on. And I remember the moment I realized I had built her future just so she could leave me behind. She told me she didn't mean for it to happen. That she needed someone who could match her ambition. That she still loved me, but in a different way. Different way. The woman whose tuition I paid, whose rent I covered, whose meals I bought, whose dreams I made possible. She left me for a senior partner at her firm. I spiraled. For weeks I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I questioned everything, my worth, my decisions, my existence. I had spent nearly a decade breaking my back for someone who discarded me like trash. But pain has a funny way of turning into purpose. I channeled all that rage into something productive. I stopped working for others and started working for myself. I knew a few guys in construction. We pooled our money and launched a small contracting business. It was grueling, but I was used to hard work. Within 2 years, we were profitable. Within 5, we were expanding. Within 10, we were a national company with dozens of government contracts and private clients. And then I started investing. First in real estate, then in tech startups, then in legal adjacent services. Slowly but surely, my empire grew. Meanwhile, Emily married that senior partner. They had a lavish wedding. I saw the photos online, her in a designer gown, him looking proud. It burned, but I forced myself to move on. Then, about 6 years after the betrayal, I got a message. It was from Emily. "Hey, I know this is out of the blue, but would you be open to catching up sometime? I'd love to talk." I laughed out loud. I didn't reply. 2 months later, another message, then another, then an email. Curiosity got the better of me, so I looked her up. Turns out, the senior partner had been caught in a massive ethics scandal and was disbarred. They divorced. She'd lost her job when the firm imploded. She was working freelance, barely scraping by. I ignored her again. Then, about a year later, fate handed me something beautiful. One of my companies, a legal tech firm, was expanding and needed someone with experience in compliance and litigation support. My HR director showed me the list of candidates. Her name was on it. I stared at that screen for a long, long time. I told HR to schedule an interview. She walked into my office 2 weeks later, wearing a cheap suit and too much makeup to hide how tired she looked. The shock on her face when she saw me behind the desk was delicious. "Michael?" she whispered. I smiled coldly. "Ms. Green, is it? Please, have a seat." She stammered through the interview. I made it professional, cold, clinical, detached. She begged for the job, practically in tears. "I know I don't deserve any favors," she said, "but I need this." I hired her. And now, every single day, she walks into my company. She reports to my managers. She follows my orders. And when she sees me in the hallway, she lowers her eyes and mutters, "Sir," under her breath. I don't need to humiliate her. Life already did that for me. But I make sure she remembers, in small, subtle ways, exactly who she betrayed. I assign her the most tedious cases. I exclude her from promotions. I call on her to present in meetings where she's clearly unprepared. Nothing abusive, nothing illegal. Just enough for her to feel the weight of every choice she made. And every time she says, "Yes, sir," to me, I remember the man who walked in on his girlfriend in bed with someone else. And I smile. Because I'm not that man anymore. I'm the man who built an empire from his own broken heart. And now, she works for me, every single day. There's a certain kind of justice in watching someone who once thought they were better than you quietly wither under the weight of their own decisions. And yet, even as I sat behind my oak desk, signing contracts worth millions while she fetched coffee for paralegals half her age, I realized something important. Revenge wasn't a single moment. It was a long, slow burn. At first, she tried to pretend it didn't bother her. Emily would smile during meetings, make small talk in the break room, and act like we were just old friends who'd grown apart. But I could see the cracks forming, the way her hands shook when she had to brief me directly, the way she avoided eye contact when I asked pointed questions, the way her smile faltered when someone mentioned how lucky she was to work for such a successful company. I didn't go easy on her. Why should I? She had built her life on my sacrifices, and then discarded me when it was convenient. So now, I made sure every single day was a reminder of the man she underestimated. One Monday morning, I called her into my office. She walked in clutching a notebook, visibly tense. "Sit," I said, not looking up from the papers on my desk. She obeyed. "I've reviewed the recent compliance reports," I continued, flipping through the pages slowly. "There are discrepancies." Her face went pale. I followed the protocol exactly. Then, your definition of exactly needs revision." I looked up and locked eyes with her. "Redo them, all of them, by Friday." "That's over 100 hours of work," she whispered. I leaned back, smiling faintly. "Then I suggest you cancel any weekend plans." Her lips trembled as she nodded. "Yes, sir." That weekend, I knew she stayed in the office until midnight. Twice. I knew, because I had the cleaning staff report to me. I didn't need her to suffer. I didn't need her to break. But I wanted her to feel, deep in her bones, the weight of every sleepless night I endured to make her dreams possible. Months turned into a year, and as time went on, the cracks turned into fractures. She stopped dressing up for work. The bright red lipstick I remembered, gone. The confident stride, replaced by hesitant, quiet steps. She avoided social gatherings with coworkers. Rumors swirled that she was living in a one-bedroom apartment on the edge of town, drowning in debt. Karma was doing its job. But fate wasn't done yet. One afternoon, my assistant buzzed me. "Sir, there's a woman here asking for a meeting. Says it's personal." It was Emily. When she entered my office, she looked smaller than I remembered, not just physically, but spiritually. She was hollow, defeated, and for the first time since she betrayed me, I saw genuine remorse in her eyes. "Michael," she said softly, closing the door behind her. "Please, I need to talk." I gestured for her to sit. "You have 5 minutes." Tears welled up before she even spoke. "I'm sorry. For everything. I know it's too late. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. But I need you to know that I regret it every single day." I said nothing. She continued, voice trembling. "He promised me the world, and I believed him. And when everything fell apart, I realized you were the only person who ever truly believed in me. And I destroyed that." Still, I stayed silent. "Please," she whispered, "just say something." I leaned forward, folding my hands on the desk. "Do you know what I did the night I found you in our bed?" Her lip quivered. I imagine you hated me. I sat in the shower for 3 hours," I said calmly. "Fully clothed. The water was freezing. And I just sat there, wondering if I'd wasted my entire life. Wondering if I was worthless. Wondering if you were right. That I'd never be enough. Michael, And then, I interrupted, I decided that you would never again define my worth." Silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. "I don't hate you," I said finally. "You're not worth that kind of energy anymore. But I will never forgive you. And I will never see you as anything more than a cautionary tale. A reminder of how blind love can ruin a man." Tears streamed down her face as she nodded slowly. "I understand." "Good," I said coldly. "Now get back to work." She left without another word. After that day, something in her completely broke. She stopped trying to win my approval. She stopped pretending to be fine. She simply existed. And in that existence was the purest punishment imaginable, the knowledge that she had once had everything and threw it away. But the story didn't end there. About 2 years later, I received an invitation to speak at a university event, a lecture for graduating law students about entrepreneurship and building legal infrastructure. I almost declined, but then I saw the name of the keynote speaker, Emily Green, It was too perfect to resist. The event was held in a grand hall filled with hundreds of students in caps and gowns. Emily was introduced before me, a brilliant legal mind with a decade of experience. She stepped on stage, composed but visibly nervous. I sat in the front row, arms crossed, watching every word. Her speech was ironic. She talked about ethics, about integrity, about the importance of loyalty and trust in building a career. I almost laughed out loud. Then it was my turn. I walked up to the podium, adjusted the mic, and stared out at the sea of young faces. "I want to tell you a story," I began, "about investment, about betrayal, and about the power of never forgetting who you are." I told them our story, not using names, of course, but enough details that she knew. Everyone knew. I described the years of sacrifice, the betrayal, the humiliation, and the rise from the ashes. "And now," I concluded, glancing directly at her, "the person who once stepped on me to climb higher works for me every day. Because while she was chasing shortcuts, I was building empires." The room erupted in applause. Emily couldn't even look at me. She slipped out the side door before the event was over. A few days later, she handed in her resignation. I didn't stop her. I didn't need to. The damage was already done. Last I heard, she moved to a small town 2 states over, working part-time legal gigs to make ends meet. No big career, no luxury condo, no millionaire husband, just the quiet, empty life she earned. And me? I moved on. I met someone new, someone who loves me for who I am, not what I can do for them. We built something real, something strong. And though I'll never forget what Emily did to me, I'm oddly grateful for it. Because without her betrayal, I might never have become the man I am today. People say revenge is a dish best served cold. But that's not true. Revenge is a dish best served patiently, over years, over decades, until the person who wronged you has to look you in the eyes and admit that you won. And every morning, when I wake up next to the woman I truly deserve, I remember that scared, broken girl muttering, "Yes, sir," in the halls of my company. And I smile, because I didn't just get revenge. I won, and she knows it. People often ask me if I ever regretted what I did, if I regret hiring her, humiliating her, making her live every day as a walking reminder of her betrayal. The truth is complicated. I don't wake up giddy about it. I don't dance around the room every time I remember her tears. It's not that kind of satisfaction. It's deeper, darker. It's the calm knowledge that the universe gave me a knife, and instead of stabbing wildly, I carved my justice slowly, inch by inch, year by year. But let me tell you one more part of the story. Because the real punishment wasn't her losing the job or crawling away into obscurity. No, the real punishment came when she tried to crawl back. About a year after she quit, I received a handwritten letter. No email, no text, an actual letter. The handwriting was shaky, but I recognized it instantly. Emily. It wasn't just an apology. It was a confession. She wrote about the affair, how it wasn't just betrayal but desperation, how the senior partner had promised to open doors for her career, how he'd manipulated her into believing that I was holding her back. She admitted that she'd hated herself for it, even while it was happening. That every time she looked at me sleeping beside her, she'd wanted to confess, but cowardice kept her silent. But then the letter got darker. She wrote about how her life had collapsed, how the senior partner had left her for another woman, how the legal community had quietly blacklisted her after the scandal, how she'd spent nights drinking herself numb, staring at the ceiling, wondering if it would be better to just end it all. And then she said something I didn't expect. "I don't want forgiveness. I know I don't deserve that. I just want you to know that you were the only person who ever truly loved me, and I threw it away for nothing." I read that line over and over, and I'll be honest, part of me felt pity, another part felt nothing at all, and a small, twisted part of me felt something close to satisfaction. I never responded. A few months later, I was at a charity gala, one of those high society events I used to mock when I was young and broke. I was there to meet investors, shake hands, make deals, and that's when I saw her again. She was waiting tables. Gone was the polished lawyer who once lectured me about ambition and status. Gone was the designer wardrobe and arrogant smirk. She wore a black apron and served champagne to people who wouldn't have given her the time of day 10 years ago. Our eyes met for just a second, and she froze. I nodded politely, then turned back to my conversation. That was the moment I realized the full scope of karma's design. It's not about dramatic confrontations or explosive revenge. It's about balance. The universe doesn't always punish people with fire and brimstone. Sometimes it punishes them with irrelevance. Still, I couldn't get that image out of my head for days. I kept seeing her standing there, a ghost of everything she'd thrown away. And as much as I told myself she deserved it, a part of me still remembered the girl I met in that coffee shop. The girl I ate noodles with on the floor of our empty apartment. The girl I once thought I'd grow old with. But I also remembered the man she made me feel like. Disposable, unworthy, less than. And I promised myself I'd never be that man again. A year later, fate twisted the knife one last time. I was closing a deal with a new client, a tech company with major government contracts. They wanted to build an internal legal team, and part of the deal involved helping them recruit senior staff. They gave me a list of candidates they were considering, and there, at the bottom of the list, was a name I hadn't seen in a long time. Emily Green. I almost felt bad. Almost. Because I knew, if they called me for a reference, I could end her career with a single sentence. But I didn't. When they asked, I told them the truth. She's competent, intelligent, a hard worker, but she has a history of making very poor personal and ethical choices. That was enough. She didn't get the job. I never saw her name on a major firm roster again. It's been 15 years since that night I found her with another man. 15 years since the worst night of my life became the catalyst for everything that followed. And now, when I look back, I don't see a tragedy anymore. I see a turning point. I've built an empire. I've loved and been loved by someone who values me. I've built a life beyond anything I could have imagined when I was that grease-stained mechanic. And she? She lives in the long shadow of her own decisions. Sometimes, people think revenge is about getting even. It's not. It's about becoming someone they can never touch again. Someone whose existence is a daily reminder of their mistake. It's about walking into a room and knowing they feel 2 inches tall in your presence. It's about silence, hurting more than any scream ever could. And that's what I achieved. There's one final scene I'll never forget. 2 years ago, I was walking out of a courthouse after finalizing a multi-million-dollar merger. As I stepped onto the street, I heard someone call my name. "Michael?" I turned. It was Emily. She looked older now, not just from time, but from regret. Life had worn her down. She held a manila folder against her chest and forced a smile. "I heard about the deal," she said softly. "Congratulations." "Thank you," I replied evenly. "I just wanted to say I'm glad things worked out for you." "They always do," I said, and started to walk away. "Michael?" she called again. I stopped. I hope you're happy." I turned back and looked her dead in the eyes. "I am." And I walked away without another word. Here's what I've learned through all of this. Betrayal doesn't destroy you. It reveals you. It shows you who you really are when everything you built is torn apart. It shows you whether you'll stay broken or whether you'll rebuild yourself stronger, sharper, untouchable. She thought she was destroying me when she walked out that door. She thought she was upgrading her life. But she didn't understand that betrayal is a forge, and I walked out of it as steel. Now, when I tell people my story, they always ask me the same question. Would you do it all over again? And my answer is always the same. Yes. Every painful second, every sleepless night, every tear, every humiliation, every ounce of betrayal. Because all of it turned me into the man I am now. And the man I am now doesn't get betrayed. The man I am now is the storm that others fear walking into. And her? She's just a name I barely remember, a cautionary tale, a ghost of a mistake. And somewhere, in a small apartment in a city she never dreamed she'd end up in, she probably lies awake at night, thinking about the man who believed in her, the man she betrayed, the man who now owns the empire she'll never touch. And that's not just revenge, that's justice.